I don't think you know this about me, Louisa. We go way back, but the way I came into tech happened 10 years ago. I was deep into my research about neural networks. Back then, 2015, neural nets was not really something that we knew was going to be part of the AI regime. AI scientists were still battling amongst themselves. The neural network scientists were like, yeah, this is part of tomorrow. And the old kind of programming paradigm AI scientists, they were like, no, probably not going to happen. But I was in my depth of neural networks. And before we go into that one, actually, I'm gonna end this story because I was foreseeing that, wait a minute, if neural networks become part of the next AI paradigm, that means we're moving away from a world where we just programmed code to one where the code teaches itself and calculates with this vast amount of data that will take us millennia to sanity check. Yes, that's their neural network. So I saw the rise of a new power relation, not just between the tech haves and the tech nots, which was a power relation that we've seen throughout industrialization, but a very new power relation we've never seen before between two types of intelligences, between the human intelligence, and I'm not talking about non-human intelligence as in the aliens, I'm talking about the intelligence that we're building in the artificial intelligence. And I'm obsessed with looking at power. I was alluded to, I'm a trained political economist, which means I study power relations. And I was trained in the kind of political economy came in the post-Soviet Union fall era because classical international relations back then couldn't foresee why the Soviet Union fell because they had a very state-centric view. State-centric view, the Soviet Union was a strong state, but actually something happened in civil society, something happened in the market, so a new field had to rise, which was political economy. So that's a field that studies power relations between the market and the state. It's a messy area, an area where business is politics and politics is business. So I'm obsessed with power. And so when this new element comes in as tech, which honestly nobody really talked about 10 years ago, I wrote this essay. I was in my mid-20s to a symposium called the St. Gallen Symposium, which is kind of an informal Davos. And I was invited to speak in front of 600 presidents and world leaders and CEOs about technological intuition, as I called it back then. And you can still see it on YouTube. My legs were shaking, and for some reason I had chosen high heels, which was awful. First time I stand in front of a stage, and I'm not being understood. These leaders came from an era where technology was assumed to come to us by the engineers and science, and then the market kind of developed the technologies that became the products and services that then humanity and we human and society would develop. And policymakers, there was this kind of neat time for policy to make sure that technology was made ethically. We don't have that time anymore. And luckily, in 10 years, technology is something that we're all talking about regardless of background, right? So amazing. And I'm kind of back and forth between thinking of we're all screwed and no, we're really not screwed. And this is what I woke up to this morning. I think this is what there we go, that's the one. So this was the poster I woke up to, maybe too small, but that's a poster of a movie from the 90s called Critical Decision. And it turns out, I didn't know this, I checked into the hotel last night, it turns out I'm in a hotel where everything is film and movie based. So my entire room is built around this movie, Critical Decision, with Kurt Russell and Steven Seagal. And it says on the top, fasten your seatbelts for the ride of your life. This is the feeling I have right now, 2025. Do you feel with me? Yeah? So, the ride of our lives. It could have been worse. The room next door had this theme. Happy, that's not me. All right, but the intuition, what do I mean by that? And it's taken me a long time to learn because in all honesty, during these 10 years, I founded a think tank called Dare Disrupt. Tech was still stuck at the level of the intellect, where we think about new business markets, new strategies, or when I work in Brussels, new policies. It's very intellectualizing. So check, we've done that. We've also done the level of the instinct, where we feel the tech on our bodies, or where we respond to dopaminic business models. Check. No, intuition, I've learned through hard work and emotion, is about a deeper listening. It's about truly checking in to our intuition, where we intuit, and where I like my own etymology of intuition is inner tutor, a deeper, much deeper listening. And every new technology that pops up to market presents a brief moment in time to alter our world. Technology for me is like the fossils we leave behind as a race that tells us a pocket of history, who had power in that moment to define how that technology was going to be developed, and who does not. So when we see AI, we have this beautiful moment in time to look for these visions. One of my favorite applications of large language models, coming out of a Ketty Foundation in New York, they actually used AI to kind of decode the language of sperm whales, and they actually found now the phonetic alphabet of sperm whales. It turns out that a thing called duality patterning, which we thought only us humans had, which is basically we put different weird sounding sounds together to create words that we then in combination create sentences in an infinite amount of ways we can create meaning. Duality patterning we thought was only secluded to humans as this egocentric race we are. Turns out, sperm whales have that. It's a beautiful invitation to be humbled by the world, to move from an ego space to an echo space, which I think the world is calling for, yes? But I bet not too many of you had read about this. Yeah? That's a different talk about the media landscape and why we, when we do moonshot thinking, need to be really diligent about our feed. Because most of us might be talking about this, right? Stargate, $500 billion into building core AI infrastructure. Now, what is that invitation? The intuition here is not just about curing cancer, which is the big tagline. It's about going deeper and saying, okay, so when Trump removes the safeguards on AI that Biden had implemented, when he wants to make AI so open source and so-called democratized and deregulated, he shows the world that it's more important for him to beat China in the race of AI than the existential risk that AI potentially poses to humanity. And he shows us that the market-based, profit-winning architectures is more important than the existential risk that AI poses to humanity. So what I'm looking for, and now we might say they don't have $500 billion. There's a big conspiracies we can chat, find me at the bar over a beer. I'd love to chat about that. But the money really doesn't matter how much. What we're looking for when we look at moonshot thinking is we want to have visions about the future that are so powerful that they attract people, the best talent in the world that wants to be part of realizing the visions that you set forth. Because when the best brain galvanize around you, want to be part of realizing things like curing cancer, that's a pretty powerful story. After the best brain, capital follows, and then these visions tend to have a self-fulfilling prophecy, what we call the sociology of expectations. Basically, our visions about the future have a performative effect on our actions in the present. So the big vision with AI, isn't it this one? We will be alleviated of tedious tasks so that we can unleash human creativity and human ingenuity. Yes? Heard that one before? That's a vision with power of pull. But I'm curious, how much creativity do we have at hand for humanity to solve the big issues? So I go to Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. I don't go there physically. I wait every year and see what comes out. What are those visions? What is the human ingenuity we've released? And this year, everything is about putting AI in front of a product. So you put AI in front of this robot, and you have a dog nanny. So here you can be at work for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day, no worries. Your dog will be taken care of. Food released, also motion exercise. They throw out the tennis ball. Yeah, is that really human ingenuity? Is that what the world needs right now? I don't know. Well, fear not. If you don't have the time to come home to your dog at all, and your dog might die, you could just have a robot dog. That also was what made the news. This beautiful robot dog that we're also petting for some reason, and then we're out running with the robot dog. Yes, exactly what the world needs right now. Or my favorite is this one, the gaming chair. You know, when you sit in front of gaming for too long and it gets so hot, fret not. You put AI in front of a gaming chair, and then it can regulate your perceived temperature with plus minus 5 degrees Celsius. Humanity. I love humanity. And you might think that these are like fringe things. No, the Consumer Electronics Show is not. Well, it's also interesting what they self-put a stamp on as innovative. And this was the big award to the most innovative product coming out of this year's Consumer Electronics Show, which is an AI mattress. Now, when we look at moonshot thinking, I really invite us all to be impeccable with our words. This is the reason this was awarded the prize, because this is an AI mattress that for some inexplicable reason, it can correct our spinal cord. But what I love is that it's a pioneered, groundbreaking evolution. What empty words. Transforming, powerful, and this is my favorite, allowing individuals to unlock their full potential through smart sleep. So the world is burning in more ways than one, and this is what we need most right now. And what bugs me the most, I mean, I would be okay with all of this, honestly. But what bugs me the most is when our energy and industry minister, Ebba Busch, I don't know if you saw this talk, she stands in front of these world leaders, world tech leaders at the Consumer Electronics Show, saying, join Team Sweden, we're open for business. So she's inviting in these tech leaders, and she's inviting them in because Sweden, just like Norway, has the coal for the data centers, has the rare earth metals that we need for the AI utopia, and has the clean-ish energy. As International Energy Agency says, AI and clean energy are the new power couple. So she says we need to look at a new generation that is hopeless and that is full of fear. And that is something where she's right. She says we need to turn fear into hope. This is the largest study of youth with a climate scientist out of Stanford University that I have the pleasure to work with, called Britt Ray. 10,000 youth surveyed, and across many different diverse countries. So we have Finland, France, UK, along with the Philippines and India. And some of the daunting figures out of this, what she calls the generation dread. I particularly highlight the one in the top corner in purple. 45% of this youth feels functionally impaired. What does that mean? Every day they are functionally impaired as they go to school, to university, or to work. They cannot fully function because they have such high climate anxiety. So she's totally right. We need to turn fear into hope, but her answer is technological innovation. And I must say, it's a bit empty. It's a bit empty when we still haven't fixed that even though we might have a clean energy revolution, we haven't seen a single energy revolution to date that has led to less energy consumption, only more. So we risk that it's just going to be a layer on top of all the other energy systems. AI is eating our energy budget and CO2 budget at an exponential rate. And what bugs me the most probably is that even though we would have, let's say all of this became clean energy, we still haven't fixed the fact that we use our natural resources at an exponential rate. And the important milestone in 2020, where man-made mass surpassed bio-made mass. I think we could fix that. What bugs me even more is this myth of the democratization of digital technology, something that we hear so much in the space of so-called exponential tech. We're facing, I think, an era where we're going to have productivity gains through technology, but where wages are going to be stagnant, and we're seeing signals of that. And when that happens, we need to democratize, truly democratize, because if we don't, the technology is just released, it's just liberalized. During industrialization, there was a 60-year period called Engels' pause, where we had this productivity gains from technology, but stagnant wages. What happened was a democratization of our institutions, our healthcare, our education, our labor unions. And we're still waiting, I think now, for a new democratization of our institutions. But I don't think it's the formal ones. I think it's the informal ones, and it starts here. So AI, as many technologies, is an invitation to go really deep. So AI is an invitation to learn about our neuroscience and our brain. And one thing Louisa has taught me, many, many things, is that our brains is a lazy piece of meat. So you might feel excited today that you're going to get so many new neural pathways created, and if you do, it's going to look like this. But what we also know from the neuroscience is that the brain is an energy optimizing muscle. So unless we feed these little paths that go on the side of the highway thinking, unless we feed them as a muscle, train them every day, they're actually going to let loose. And we're going to go back to our highways, kind of normal ways of thinking. And according to the universality hypothesis of how we build AIs today, and a little thing called gradient descent for the nerds in here, AI is built exactly the same. AI prunes away divergent thinking. AI prunes away outlier thinking, and is also energy optimizing. So a reason we might have all this shit coming out of the Consumer Electronics Show, yeah, I'm among friends. I'm going to mind my French. I'm going to talk really frank. I hope that's okay. I think might be because this thing, an article that came out of Cognitive Science that blew my mind, where they tested with ChatGPT. They asked ChatGPT to come up with solutions to ideas, to policies, and to code. And then they analyzed what the response was, and it showed the growth bias that is inherent in our culture. So 249x more proponent to give us anything that has to do with additions in relation to subtraction, compared to subtraction. So I tested this myself by asking ChatGPT, okay, the word add is a positive word, would you agree? And then it says, yes, I agree. The word add is generally considered a positive word because it often conveys the idea of enhancing, increasing, or improving something. The action of adding usually leads to positive outcomes, growth, and enrichments in various contexts. Now I ask the opposite. Okay, so the word remove is a positive word. Would you agree? The word remove is generally considered neutral, depends on the context, tick, tick, tick. So we know AI is a mirror, and it shows us biases like sexism and racism. Those are quite evident. They hurt when we see them and we can correct. But these are hidden biases, and there are many, many more, that where we need to be really awake as we invite them intimately into our work days, into our life, intimately as partners. So it's really an invitation to be critical and also be inquisitive. What can we learn about this language that we've inherited? The English language, actually, in my research, I found that the English language is, it's a language of materialism. If you take all the words combined, about 70% of the English words are nouns. What are nouns? Things. Compared to 30% that are verbs. Verbs, what is that? It's a movement. So in my research, I compared that to a indigenous language in North America called Potawatomi. That's a totally different structure. Here, you have 70% that are verbs, motions, movements, and only 30% that are nouns. So what does that tell us? It's a language of movement because it's a language that is inherent, connected, and intimately connected to our nature. Very, very different from the language that we speak. And actually, the Swedish language follows the same structure, so I dare to say and think that maybe the Norwegian structure follows the same language. If you look at the 40 last years of the Swedish language, half of the new words added are English words, and 75% of the new words added are nouns, things. What an invitation to go deep into our language and ask even deeper questions. So I went quite deep. I went deep into the Amazon, and I went really high up into the Andes in search for new ways of thinking that what if you speak that language? Would you then come up with the shit that comes out of Consumer Electronics Show? So I met this guy called Porfirio, 4,000 meter high in the Andes. He's Quechuan, and he stands with his wife, Tomatea. And what they're doing right now is called the Pachamama ceremony. It's a ceremony that he does and she does right before planting new seeds that are becoming the potatoes that they harvest. And what he does here is that he turns towards all the mountains around him, giving thanks. And in conversation with him, I understood something quite interesting. The word for mountain in Quechua is called apos, and apos is directly translated into a spiritual leader. Quite different than the kind of dead word of a mountain or a berg in Swedish. And it got me thinking, if your language locks in your view of the world and the view of a mountain as a spiritual leader, would you ever start a mine in a mountain? Probably not. In deeper conversations with him, and I'm a kind of a futurist, some would call sometimes, I so like the term, but I'm quite interested in the notion of time, and he blew my mind in a conversation with him where he started talking about his heritage and his history, and he pointed in front of him, and I was like, why are you keeping pointing in front of you when you talk about history? Turns out in Quechua, the word for history is karak, and it actually is the same word, one-to-one translated, as in front. History, it turns out, is in front of him, and the future is behind him, which is karkani in Quechua. And I asked him, okay, so what's going on here? And I think most of us in here, hands up, do you see the future in front of you? Yes. And if you're Swedish or Norwegian, framtid, fremtid, jag vet inte, it's locked in the language that our future is in front of us. But for Porfirio, the history is what is in front of him because the history has been seen. He has seen his history, or his ancestors have seen the history. And what he shows me is that sometimes foresight is hindsight. And for him, he walks into the future with his back against the future, mindful of the history that he wants to guard and take with him. What an invitation this AI world gives to all of us if we just ask a bit deeper questions. Some of the questions that I ask then is, how does the language we speak actually impact our moonshot thinking? How would a Quechuan code artificial intelligence? And how can we use technologies to truly expand our thinking and not shrink it? Large language models, can we use them to truly create large world views? For me, working in innovation, I found that it's really about tuning into the right type of constraint when we innovate. No constraint at all, no innovation. And I dare to say that is what's happening at the Consumer Electronics Show. We haven't given them the proper constraints. Too much constraint also, and we get no innovation. We get paralyzed, right? So how do we find that right balance? For me, I'm going to show you a little bit. It's been a bit dystopic, so I'm going to give you a little bit of the chatty Cathy, the fun stuff, what gets me up in the morning after I've thought about the existential risks of AI. For me, I'm excited as an economist to start using artificial intelligence to truly govern our planetary resources. I think about this generation that has not only inherited the largest ecological debt ever inherited throughout time, but also the largest amount of wealth ever to go from one generation to another, up towards $100 trillion. You could call them the Greta Thunbergs of the world, but with money. That's what I call them. And what they vote for, I know there's a lot of shit to say about the COP in Baku, but that was pretty cool. It didn't really make the headlines, but that's a first, a carbon market. It's not perfect, but the first time we supranationally actually can start to talk about governing our carbon. And AI will enable this. Very hard to do without AI. This generation are also choosing politicians, like in Wales, where now it's forbidden to lie in politics. What? No, actually, it's not yet forbidden to lie because it's going to be ratified in 2026, so they still have a year to figure out how to not lie in politics. And the rest of us are still here in a lying space. But that's what the new generation are choosing as politicians. They're also choosing politicians that choose to give those amazing whales legal personhood. In New Zealand and the Tongan Islands and Polynesian Islands, they have now given whales legal personhood. That seems ridiculous, radical. What? Legal personhood to whales? Inanimate objects have legal personhood. Corporations have legal personhood. Ships were granted legal personhood in 1867, before the slaves that they were shipping had legal personhood. So this is maybe not that radical. And combine with, what if we then could give them the voice that they can utter in court, right? Now we have the phonetic alphabet, so not too far away. You think that's radical? I don't know. And what about back to those indigenous languages? I'm deep into my love of indigenous languages. We have 7,000 languages to date on this earth, but we're losing a language every 2 weeks because of linguistic isomorphism. Every language you lose, I feel, is a loss of a universe. I've only scratched the surface into Potawatomi or Quechuan. What other worldviews are locked in languages? And luckily, we have an amazing amount of AI projects used to try to digitize all the languages and keep them up in libraries before they are becoming extinct. But what is a library without visitors? I hope you want to visit these libraries with me. One of the libraries that is really close to hand to the Nordics. We have access to one of the few indigenous communities and people in Europe. I was in the Arctic last week, actually, to talk about AI in the Arctic. So I did a little deeping into Sami language. In Southern Sami, I'm sorry about the small text. I would love to give my slides to you. So just find me in the bar and you'll get my slides. But they have a word for dry birch without bark. They also have a word for a bull that keeps to itself in the summer. They have a word for a cuckoo calling in the south. I don't know what the word is for cuckoo calling in the north, but I'm sure there's a word for that. And a word for the outermost finest layer of birch bark. Imagine this language that forces you to have such an astute and detailed view of the nature. And we have access to this. How beautiful. These are some of my utopias, mixed with my dystopias. And they exist for all the technologies. I just took a deep dive in AI. 3D printing is my pet technology, actually, totally separate talk. But in all of these technologies, we have access to a dystopic sunset view where we just use things like 3D printing to produce parts faster, 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 but still in mass quantities. Or we look at 3D printing as a totally new way of having a relation to the material world, where we start building weird, alien-looking structures. And how does the material world impact our thought? Or quantum computing. I just saw a report from BCG that says Use quantum computing to find more oil and gas. What an offense to quantum computing. Quantum computing is an invitation for us to learn about the subatomic particles that make up our world. And in this world, a subatomic particle, one can be in two places at the same time, superposition, or two can jive together and be put with a galaxy apart and then be entangled, sharing properties in real time with one another. How wild. Quantum is an invitation for us to look at the world with fresh eyes like a newborn child. So what are your utopias and dystopias? For me, intuition is kind of this prism. That's how I start to see it now, is this prism in our belly through which we can access really a wide spectrum of emotions and human experiences. I invite you, when you think about moonshot thinking, to truly sit in the dark, to sit in the deepest of shit. And I'm not talking about a customer problem. I'm talking about a humanity-level problem. Throughout these 10 years where I wanted to change the world changed me. I've sat in death. I've experienced big deaths, and I'm sure you have too. We had a collective close to death and real death experience in the pandemic. And for those of you that have experienced the darkest of death, the deepest of griefs, you know that when you sit in it, you access a well of light and a well of love, because everything in our universe is a perfect symmetry. So if it sounded anti-tech in my talk, it's because I'm in love with tech, and I want to protect tech, and I don't want to offend tech by giving it shitty applications. I hope we together can meet today in these existential risks and dare to sit there together, and only in that deepest well of love find our existential opportunities. Because if existential risk exists, then existential opportunity has to exist. And checking into our deepest well of love has to be the best breeding ground for moonshot thinking. If that isn't, I bloody don't know what is. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Märtha. With all of your questions, I thought about one thing that I've learned from the head of innovation at Google, Frederik Fert, a German guy, and he said that true innovators, they always lead with questions, because a question will open your mind and force you into a new vista, whereas an answer is something that can force your thinking, speaking about the words that you're giving out, to seek a certain solution. So thank you so much for all of those brilliant questions. Now we have 2 acts left in the first segment, and the next person that I want you to welcome on stage has a startup studio in France that is dedicated to positive impact innovations. And every year, he and his teams are evaluating hundreds of ideas and opportunities, and evaluating them from the perspective of what is a great idea